Hello class. I'm going to try doing these videos a little bit differently. My best friend found out that I'm making these and is now intent on watching these videos, has even found the YouTube page where they're being posted. And because I don't want my mom to be too bored while watching these, I'm going to try and make them a little bit more interesting and engaging. Heaven forbid, maybe even funny. Of course, the thing that I need to watch out for is I need to make sure I'm not trying too hard to make these engaging. So if I'm trying too hard, go ahead and leave a comment on the YouTube section and let me know. I'm going to go ahead and just give you a heads up on this next slide. I'm definitely going to be trying too hard, but hopefully it'll get better from there. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Let's say I'm interested in finding out what the most popular TV show is currently. And the way to go about this, obviously, is to ask a bunch of people what their favorite TV show is to see which one is the most popular. So I'm going to go through what the top 5 picks were, and then I'll tell you which one of those 5 actually got the most support. So first up, Stranger Things. A little bit unexpected that a show modeled after the 80s is doing so well in these contemporary times, but as they say, stranger things have happened. Number 2, we got Walking Dead. All right, I'm going to be honest, I was going to do puns with each and every one of these, but I now don't want to do that. Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and the wild card, the one that came out of left field, the one that nobody saw coming. All right, we've got All My Children. All My Children might not have the pizzazz right now that it once did, but having run from 1970 all the way through 2011, it has firmly planted a flag in the hearts of many and is still very nostalgically remembered by quite a few souls in the United States. And in fact, that is the winner. All right, All My Children. Now let's talk about how we got this data. So I just asked people what their favorite show was. My population, I want to know what was the favorite show of U.S. adults. And so my method of doing it was I had to collect a sample. I obviously wasn't going to ask every single U.S. adult. That would be way too time consuming. All right, so I don't want to, put too much effort into this. That's the kind of effort you put into finding a cure for cancer. We're just trying to find out what the favorite TV show is. So we're gonna do a less effortful route. So I was hanging out with my grandma one day. She was hosting a huge bridge party for her friends and their friends. There were like 50 of them there. Not all at once, they kind of came and went, but I saw a huge opportunity and I took advantage of it. I just asked each one of them what their favorite show was, and All My Children was one of the overwhelming favorites among them, with Breaking Bad coming in at number 2. All right, so it goes without saying that this is somewhat problematic. This is what we've before called a convenience sample. They're right there, and I decided to include them in my sample because they were right there. I didn't go through any effort to make sure that the people in my sample were truly representative of the U.S. population as a whole. All right, mainly just elderly women for the most part living in Illinois, who, as I said, probably had watched All My Children for 40 years. Now, you guys might be wondering, why are we going over this? We've already gone over it before. It's so obvious, it barely uh, needs to be stated, but in fact it does. I get that abstractly we know, you guys know that we shouldn't use convenience samples, but the fact of the matter is, um, we use convenience samples all the time. Let me just give you an example. This is going to be a real issue. that I'm going to go over, and this is going to be real, actual points that people have tried to make as evidence regarding this issue. So, what's the issue? Medicare for all. On the one hand, I've heard one person say these single payer health systems don't work. My wife went to a hospital in the UK and it was filthy and inadequate. All right. On the other hand, I've heard this one too. I got hit by a car while traveling in Italy, but was wonderfully taken care of for free in one of Italy's single payer healthcare systems. So single payer healthcare works. These are even worse than convenience samples. With my convenience sample, I at least had was taking into account like 40 different people. This is just one experience on each side. This is what we would call anecdotal evidence. It's for the most part worthless, but it's used all the time. It's what we naturally fall back on. Just because one hospital in the UK was filthy and inadequate during one period of time doesn't mean that that's how the hospitals in the UK tend to be. And by the same token, because you may have had one wonderful experience in one of Italy's hospitals while you were traveling there, that doesn't mean that that's how the hospitals in Italy tend to go on average. You have to take a bigger, more representative sample. Let's take a look at another case. Right, this is also from actual experience. So we've all heard the truism that opposites attract. All right, it's supposedly kind of strange that maybe an introverted person ends up getting married to extroverted people. How we tend to be attracted to people who are different from us. Okay, so while it may be the case that people of very opposite backgrounds and personalities get married and stay together, this is not the norm. In fact, I'm not saying that you have to go with the norm, but the fact of the matter is that relationships where you have people of very opposite personalities and backgrounds, they tend to not work out. That's just what the evidence is when you actually take a good representative sample. And I was trying to explain this to somebody while I was in college, because we had gone over the research in one of my classes, and this was the response that I got. No, my mom's Democrat and my dad's Republican. Opposites so do attract. All right. I'm not saying that opposites never attract. I'm just saying that they tend to not attract. And what this is right here is, again, anecdotal evidence, and even of a kind that's worse than that convenience sample of my grandma and her bridge playing friend. This is even worse than that, to say I know of a case where opposites attracted, therefore opposites do attract. The fact of the matter is they tend not to. Okay, so again, even though these things seem obvious when we think about it, it really is against human nature to bear this this statistical knowledge in mind in our everyday affairs. So, what's the right way to go about it? We're gonna want have some element of randomness in our sample selection. So let's give it another try. So I could randomly pick people out of my grandmother's address book and call them and see what their favorite shows are. That's going to be a little bit better than the convenience sample. I have this element of randomness in there, but there's almost certainly going to be an issue of undercoverage. All right. For example, my grandmother's friends and acquaintances, it's not going to cover the whole scale of the U.S. population. There's not going to be a lot of people from California in her address book. Not a lot of people from younger generations who aren't raised in her family's tradition. So there's going to be huge segments of the U.S. population that aren't really going to be adequately covered when we use this approach. Now you could say, look, Mr. Bobbitt, this is again another sampling technique that is obviously flawed. That's true, but let's take another case. What if you just randomly picked names out of a phone book? Well, bear in mind that phone books aren't going to have cell phone numbers, they're just going to have landlines. And there's huge segments and swaths of the U.S. population that no longer have landlines. I have two sets of parents. Neither one of them have a landline anymore. I don't have a landline. I should go sample my friends, see how many of them have landlines. But my suspicion is that most people that have landlines nowadays are going to be, for the most part, they'll be older, whereas people under 40 are going to be much less likely to have landlines, and so they're going to be underrepresented in a sample that just randomly calls people from phone books. So even though that seems like a perfect way to get your random sample, you need to consider if there are certain segments of the population that aren't going to be adequately covered. All right, I could mail questionnaires to random addresses. All right, everybody's address is going to be available, or you can at least get a list of addresses throughout the United States, randomly select a subset of those and mail this questionnaire to them. And then the questionnaires you get back, that'll be your data. This sounds great. Again, there's a problem. Voluntary sample. All right, you send that questionnaire to my dad, he's going to throw that in the trash after looking at it for 1 second. He's often talked about strapping weapons to his mailbox. He hates getting the mail so much. So only a certain kind of people are going to return these questionnaires, and you're only going to be getting data on that certain kind of people. So in a sense, when you use a voluntary sample, that's going to have an inherent possibility of resulting in undercoverage of only certain people responding and certain other swaths of the U.S. population not responding. So this fourth way ultimately could get you into legal problems, but this is, statistically speaking, this is really the way to go about it. You knock on the door of those random addresses and refuse to leave until you get your answers. All right. Again, it might cause problems, but statistically, that is the cleanest way to go. And as long as I can give you guys an image of the practice that you need to try to approach, then I will have done my job. So let's look at some other areas where statistics is important. We don't just use it when trying to find out what the opinions are of people. We use it in all facets of life. So let's consider this question. How frequently are sharks swimming nearby at beaches? Right, so we're getting a better idea of how frequently sharks are swimming nearby at beaches. Drones are giving us these great aerial views that are making it very clear that they're probably near us more often than we know. This is a picture from some drone footage. I'll leave a link to the webpage in the description box. Needless to say, I'm probably never going in the beach again. All right, but we got these drones. How are we going to use them to gather our data on the frequency with which sharks are swimming nearby when we're at beaches? I should point out, by the way, that in the video you will see, and this is, I think, the fourth video on that webpage, you'll see that this guy has no clue that this shark is swimming by, and the shark just goes right on past him. Okay, step number one. We could use drone observations from one beach at one time of day. We'll say Daytona Beach at noon during one season of the year. We'll say winter. All right, so we're taking lots of recordings at Daytona Beach during noon during every day of winter this coming year. That's what we'll do. So tons of observation, tons of data, and we find out, lo and behold, there's almost no sharks near beaches at this time of year. Okay, obviously this is problematic. Even though you have tons of data, you didn't collect it in a good way. You need to collect data in a good way in order for it to be truly informative. If we want to know how often sharks are at beaches in Florida, then we need to get observations from a good representative sample of beaches at Florida. One beach isn't going to be enough. All right, so let's get drone observations from random beaches at random times of day during each season of the year. That gives us a better understanding of how frequently sharks are swimming nearby. All right, let's look at one last example. So how good is this restaurant? So for those of you who don't know what we're looking at, this is at least supposed to be what's known as mechanically separated chicken. And at least used to be the main ingredient used in chicken nuggets. It's a combination of pulverized chicken bone, eyeball, tendons, all crushed and made into this single paste. I really don't know if there was some kind of accident at a restaurant here and they dumped a huge box of chicken paste on this chair or not. But to be honest, it wouldn't be any less gross than normal if they just scooped it off of this chair and floor and made it into chicken nuggets. Okay, but that's something that you can research on your own time. So you go to a restaurant and you give your opinion of that restaurant. All right, is that restaurant any good? All right, what's a way that we could rephrase this question to make it a statistical question? To do that, we could ask what percent of the time we can expect its food to taste good. All right, so if the restaurant is bad, then we can expect that its food is normally going to taste bad. If a restaurant is good, then we can expect that its food will a high percentage of the time taste good. Maybe not all the time, but a high percentage of the time the food will taste good. Now, this is I'm going to go over a statistical fallacy that is actually quite common in all of us. All right, an incorrect way of sampling. You try out a restaurant. It's a new restaurant. You try it out, and your food sucked. And what do you say? I'm never going back there again. That food sucked. That restaurant is terrible. And remember, what that implies is that you can expect for a large percent of the time when you go there that the food is going to taste horrible. But your sample here is terrible. It's a horribly inept sample. And I can give you a good example of this. My dad loves my stepmother's cooking, but he has made it very clear that her meatloaf absolutely sucks. My dad likes certain meatloaf, but my stepmom's apparently absolutely sucks. Now, if my dad were to go to a restaurant that my stepmom supposedly owned, decided to get the meatloaf, didn't like it, and then went away saying that restaurant sucked, he would be in error. Because if he went again on other occasions and got other kinds of food, he would actually change that opinion, because then he would have a more representative sample of what kind of food that restaurant tends to serve. All right, so a better approach would be to try each of a randomly selected set of food items at least once. Not just try the meatloaf, but then, maybe it sucks, but come back the next time and maybe try the chicken fried steak or the chicken paste, whatever floats your boat. So that's a little bit better. But let's say that you go in there, you order steak. My grandpa I'm getting pretty autobiographical here. My grandfather has reported going to Cracker Barrel. And here's my grandpa committing the statistical fallacies. He went to Cracker Barrel. They served him a steak that they forgot to cook. All right, so he's never going back there. That was just one time. I've been to Cracker Barrel many times and have gotten their steak many a times. And it has always been cooked when I have gotten it. So, my grandpa got the steak once. You could say it was cooked poorly that one time, but that was just one time. Maybe they had a bad chef that day and fired him later that evening. So if we want to get a true good idea of whether a restaurant is good or bad, what we ultimately need to do is try each of a randomly selected set of food items and try them multiple times. With that said, to be honest though, if I go to a restaurant twice and it sucks both times, I'm not going back a third. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and stop at this point. You guys probably want a snack or something. We'll pick up on the next video.